Hello, so this video is for everyone who always want to learn Blender but you're already familiar with other 3D programs like Cinema 4D, 3ds Max or Maya. This is not, and I repeat, not for beginners who never touched 3D. I will not show you how to make a donut, okay? So starting Blender for the first time, you will see a screen probably looking like this. You can leave everything how it is, just change the spacebar to tools. I will show you later why. You have the options to use industry standard hotkeys and navigation, but I strongly recommend you to leave it as the Blender native. Okay, let's start with the UI. So in Blender there are only 4 different panels you need to understand basically. 2 of them you already know, because one of them is the viewport and one of them is the outliner. I don't think I need to explain what these are. I will give you some tips on the outliner though later. The 2 Blender specific ones is for one the properties panel at the bottom right, and here you have a bunch of different very important settings, and depending on what you're selecting at the moment these are changing, and some you only need for modeling, some you only need for rendering, some for shading. So I will not go through them one by one. I will go through them the moment you actually need them, and I mean otherwise you won't remember them anyway. And the other one is the N panel, which you can activate and deactivate with, well, you've guessed it, N. And same thing, I will mention them when you actually need them. The important UI element for now is the area flexibility. So each area in Blender you can change its size very simple, very quickly, and also its quantity. So each area at the top left you can drag it to the side, or you can drag it to the top and bottom, and you can duplicate them. You can also collapse them by the same principle, but you can drag it into an existing area, so you can collapse them. And each area at the top you have a free space. If you right click on it you have a bunch of different other options. The 2 most important ones are close area and duplicate area into a new window. So let's say you want to delete the timeline but you do not want to collapse all the time, you just right click on it and then close area and it's gone. And the duplicate into a new area, a new window, is very useful because now you can, let's say, have a second viewport but on your second monitor, for example. Yeah, very important quality of life stuff. These panels, or these tabs basically, these are not useless but not mandatory, because each area you can change its content as well. So let's say, so this is now a 3D viewport, but I will say, okay, now I want this to be an outliner. You can do that. So you can change your UI, you can customize your UI super quickly, and yeah, it's very simple. Okay, let's talk about the navigation. So navigation in Blender is always based around the middle mouse button. So if you want to pan the camera, to rotate or orbit the camera, it is the middle mouse button. If you want to pan, it is Shift and middle mouse button. If you want to zoom, it is Control and middle mouse button. But of course you can use your mouse wheel for that as well. If you want to go to orthographic mode, it is Alt and middle mouse button. And to leave orthographic, you just have to press middle mouse button again and you are back to perspective. If you want to zoom, or actually not zoom, if you want to focus on a single object, let's say this light, and your camera somewhere here, you just have to press the period key on your numpad and everything will be focused on the selected object. So let's talk about move and transform tools. So the tools you will find here, but I know you're better than this, so let's give you the hotkeys. So to move anything it is G, to rotate it is R, and to scale it is S. So I think that's pretty easy to understand. Other than the G for moving, don't ask me why, it is what it is. But you might wondering, okay, where the hell are the gizmos? Good question, I had the same question, and this is why I told you to bind your spacebar to tools, because now you can press space and then G or S or S or R, so space G, and then you will have your gizmo, and then yeah, you can basically operate the same as in other 3D programs. The tools you will also find here, but I mean, come on, just use the hotkeys. I think this is a good time to introduce the N panel, because if you press N and under items you will find the transform data basically, and then you can influence of course the transform here as well instead of the gizmos. And under object properties like here, you have the same thing basically. It's just mirrored. Okay, if you want to freeze transformations, in Blender it's called applying. So if you, let's say, scale this cube and you want this to be 1 again, just have to press Ctrl A, and then you have apply location, rotation, scale, or just all transform, and then you will see you will have everything on 1 again. Okay, let's talk about modeling. So first I want to delete everything. So you can do that by just dragging and box select, or you can just press A and then delete with the delete key or with the X key. In Blender it is basically the same key. To add anything to your scene, you can come here and then go to add, and then for example mesh, but everyone in Blender, trust me, uses Shift A. You should remember that hotkey. So Shift A, and let's create a cylinder, for example. And the moment you create anything in Blender, you will always have an options box at the bottom left. Then here you can have some adjustments on the vertex count, the radius, and the depth. But if you create, for example, a cube, then you will only have the size, for example, and etc. It's kind of like the primitives in Cinema 4D, right? Or the make editable one. But once you click away, this options will be gone. So you will not have it back. So now if you want to change the vertex count, you cannot unless you really edit the polygons. Kind of annoying, I know, but it is what it is. And speaking of polygons, I think I will show you how to do that as well, obviously. So let's create a cube again, and then go from, so now we're in object mode, and we need to go to edit mode now. And to do that, you can also press tab key. Pretty important. Everyone uses tab for edit mode and not and object mode. And in edit mode, you'll have vertex selection, edge selection, and face selection. And you can press 1, 2, and 3 to switch through them. The most important modeling operators are basically extrude with E. It is I for inset, and it is Control B for bevel. And with your, you can scroll the segment count up and down. Yeah, that's pretty useful. And Control R for loop tools. I don't think I need to explain what this does. It should be, yeah, you should understand that. Selection, very important. So selection is, yeah, standard is just left click, no surprise. If you want to add your selection, it is just shift and left click. If you want to deselect something, you just shift left click and then just the selection. If you just select anything and then control and then left click somewhere else, it is start and endpoint selection basically. And if you want to loop select, you have to press alt and left click, and depending on where you're clicking, you will change whether it's vertical or horizontal. And if you want to delete stuff, you just press, just select anything like this, for example, and then press X or delete. And in Blender, you need to be a little bit more precise on what you actually delete. So if you, for example, delete face, like here, it makes sense. It's just what you would expect. But if you delete, for example, then the vertex, could be a little bit confusing. So be precise or be precise on what you actually want to delete. One thing I will show you is dissolving. So let's say you want this edge loop to go away. Normally you will guess, just delete the edge, but then this will happen, and this is pretty sure not what you want. In Blender it is called dissolving. So dissolve edges, and then this is hopefully the thing you've expected. If you, for example, deleted anything, for example like this, and you want to fill the hole again, you just have to click on select the vertex and then press F. So F is always creating a polygon based on your selection. If you want to model more non-destructively or automated, you have to use the modifiers. So in the modifiers properties here, Blender comes with a bunch of different modifiers you can use. I will not cover them all in this video, don't worry. I will just cover the most important ones. So for example, if you click on this plane and then use the subdivision surface, it's just a sub-D modifier, right? You will find this in any program. And for example, here we can add a bevel modifier, and then have something like this. And here is the solidify modifier, which is adding thickness to your objects. I think these three modifiers are the most important ones you use practically every time you model. The modifier list is endless, but the order is important. So for example, here, if I take the solidify and place it before the subdivision, it will change. So it's always from top to bottom. And as you can see, depending on which object I'm selecting, the modifier list is changing. So every object has its own modifier list, basically. You cannot use modifiers inside your outliner, like in Cinema 4D, for example. So you cannot use one bevel for multiple objects. Unfortunately, it's not possible. Speaking of outliner, actually, I want you to show Blender's outliner and how it works and some operations connected with it. So in the outliner, you will see on the right side 2 buttons. One is for visibility in the viewport and one is for visibility in the renders. So with this button, you can disable it in the viewport, and the shortcut for this is H. So if you select something and then press H, it will hide it. Alt H, if you press Alt H, then it will unhide, but it will unhide everything. So if you hide multiple things, Alt H, it will always unhide everything. There is no unhide a single thing. I don't know why. And this is to disable things inside the render, but it is visible in the viewport. I'm pretty sure you will find a use case for that. There is more under the filters here. I think the most important ones you should maybe know is the selectable. So if you deselect it, if you disable it, then you cannot select your objects anymore, which can be pretty useful. I think that's basically it for the outliner, other than the fact that you cannot, so these objects are sorted, they are sorted alphabetically, and you cannot just randomly, not randomly, but specifically like place the plane above the cube, for example. It's not possible. I don't know why. It's really annoying. You can only do that with collections, which is Blender's way of grouping things, but it is not really a group, so I will cover this in a separate video. Okay, so now I want to move on to the operations. So let's create a new cube and move it to here. And so the operations I want to show you is, for example, to duplicate an object. So duplicate any object, it is Shift D, and it is always bind to your mouse. So the copy thing is bind to your mouse, and if you want to spawn it on the original position, you have to press Escape, and then you have a perfect copy of it. If you want to have a linked or a duplicate, an instance, the difference, you have to press Alt and D. And then you will see, if you then change, for example, like this edge, you will see, okay, this is connected with each other. So yeah, Shift D and Alt D, that's the difference. So then to parent something, you have to select the child and then the parent you want to have, and then press Ctrl P and then Object. And then as you can see, the cube is now the parent of this plane, and it behaves like you would expect a parent, and it is also inside the cube now in the outliner. To unparent, you select the child, Alt P, and then clear parent, and everything is now where it's supposed to be basically before. If you want to combine things, you have to select both or select all, and then Ctrl J. This is going to combine everything, but as you can see, the modifiers list of the plane is gone basically, because everything is now the cube, and now we only have the bevel. So I will just delete it so it's not that confusing. If you want to separate everything again, you need to go to edit mode and then press P, and then either by selection, which we don't have at the moment, by material, or by loose parts. In our case, loose parts makes the most sense. And then, as you can see, everything is separated again. Okay, let's talk about shading, lighting, rendering, and all this other stuff. So let's talk about the modes. So I'm gonna show the modes. So we are in the solid mode at the moment. So this is the standard one. On the left, you have the wireframe mode, and on the right, you have the look depth mode, and it is basically, you could imagine this as an HDRI setup. As you can see, you can switch between multiple HDRIs that comes with Blender. You cannot render this out. This is just for look depth, for preview, basically for you, so you can save time lighting. And this is rendered with Blender's real-time renderer Eevee. So this is not physical correct. So this will never be physical correct if you are inside this tab. If you want to then actually render stuff, you need to go to the far right to the render view, and under render properties, you can select if you want to use Eevee or cycles. And Eevee, like I said, is a real-time, and cycles is a physical correct renderer. A small tip for Eevee: yes, it looks pretty shit because because by default AO is not enabled, so you absolutely need to enable that, because otherwise it is practically useless. Just want to mention that, but I will focus more on cycles because this is probably what you are more used to. So let's switch to cycles, and you can see that, okay, things are starting to look a little bit more serious and real. So I suggest definitely turn your device to GPU, because CPU in cycles is not that fast, not gonna lie. So if you can, GPU. If this is gray or something, go to Edit, Preferences, System, and then Optics CUDA or whatever you have, and make sure to check your hardware. Under sampling, you have the opportunity to, say that, okay, I don't want so many samples in the viewport or something. I think by default this is like 1,000 and this is like 4,000. Just play around with, like 100 is, for example, very low samples, just saying. I just have it on so I can preview faster here. Yeah, I think that's about the shading, like the render engines. Next, okay, how about lighting? So as you can see, there's already light, and I didn't put any light into it because the world itself has always, by default, a sky dome, and you will see it in the world properties. And you can see that, okay, this is not completely black, and there's a strength of 1. So let's make it, for example, 0. There is no light anymore, and if you turn it like to 20, then yeah, it is bright. So let's turn it back to 0 and make Shift A, and then let's create a light, for example, like an area light. And yeah, as you can see, this is hopefully something you would expect from a rendering software. This shouldn't be new to you, I hope. So okay, then maybe combine it with the world. But how about making materials and stuff? So just select any object that can have a material, for example, like this sphere, for example. And for materials, you need to go to the materials properties. And here is your material manager. And this button is the browse materials for the whole scene. At the moment, there is not a single material for the whole scene. So what we have to do is just create a new one. And this is our first material. And you can see in the Dropbox, there is one material. And for example, let's make this, for example, blue. And then we go to another thing and create a new material. This is then material 1, and you can see, okay, the whole scene, there are now 2 materials, and we can say, okay, I want this to have the first material. This is of course possible, and then let's switch it back and make this, I don't know, like this. And we have the third one, create a new one, material 002, and make this a little bit red. So you can see now we have 3 materials, and this is how you switch between each other. But of course, this is not that's not it. If you want more control, then I suggest to create a new window and then switch here to the shader editor. And now hopefully this looks a little bit more familiar. So depending on what you have selected, this is then mirrored into a shader graph view, and now you have more control over everything. And for example, you can Shift A, just like creating polygons, meshes. You have a bunch of different shaders, textures, and whatever. You can do a lot of procedural stuff in Blender. It's really good, really good. So let's, for example, make this. Let's turn this, for example, into glass. So we have a glass BSDF, just a glass shader, for example, and then boom. And then, for example, here we want to make this, let's say, a little bit more dark, and then we make it full metallic, and then roughness down. Or maybe this is a strange color, but whatever. And then here for the sphere, we want to make the roughness low, so we just have a shiny ball. Yeah. let's talk about the world again. So if we go back to world, let's like how do we maybe, for example, import like an HDRI. So the world settings, there's the same graph for the world, but you have to switch from object to world. And now this is the same thing, just mirrored. But now we have a little bit more control. So let's say we want to import the HDRI. So Shift A, search for environment, because I know you pretty much will use an HDRI in your life. So I'm going to show you how to do that. Open, and then search for your HDRI folder. Let's say like, let's grab this one and plug it into the color. And you can see, okay, now we have an HDRI set up. Pretty simple, pretty easy, and with the strength we can regulate the brightness of it. So let's turn this to 1, for example. And yeah, I think that's basically it about the shading. The shading aspect of everything is, in my opinion, pretty easy in Blender. And if you want to go back to your the materials of your objects, and you go back to object, don't forget. Good. The next step would be, I would say, camera, because let's because we want to render stuff out, right? So what we can do is create a new window here again, and we will leave this as our render view, and with this as our 3D view. Then Shift A, and then create a new camera, and we can place the camera somewhere which just makes a little bit more sense. So in Blender, if you want to go into the camera, let's say I want the camera to be here, be in the viewport that you want to be, and press 0 on the numpad, and now you are in the camera mode. And if you then move the camera, for example, you see that this is then corresponding. If you want to move the camera with the viewport navigations, because if you do it here, then you will go away from the camera. What you have to do, and this is really important, N panel, view, and under view there's camera to view. Click this, and now you're able to move the camera with the standard navigation hotkeys. And if you, for example, want to make this preview a little bit bigger, you just disable this, scroll a little bit into it, disable it, enable it again, press N so you can see something, and then you have a little bit bigger. So yeah, this is the standard workflow to work with cameras. Really, really important. So let's say you want to render stuff out. What you have to do is come to render, and then render image, and then this will render the image based on your camera. Blender does, if you render like a single image, Blender, you cannot say to have an output before you render it, so you always have to come and then view, image, and then save as. If you want to render out animations, then you need to come to the output properties. Here you also have control over the resolution of your camera and whatsoever, and the FPS and the frame range, and then the output. But this output is only for animations. Single frames cannot have an output, so you always have to single frame it, wait until it's finished, and then save as. Just saying. I don't know why this is the thing, but this is the thing here. And speaking of animation, let's say you want to animate something. But I think for this I will get rid of the render view. So let's say you want to move this. Let's turn this into our timeline. And okay, so the start point, so if you want to set a keyframe, it is I. And for our case, we want to the location, get the end panel back so you can see what I'm doing. And then let's move on to frame 20, for example, move it here, and then we press I again, and then available. Okay, available is for every keyframe that's already keyed, or we just location again, and you can see we have our animation ready. For more control with graphs, you can of course do that. Then let me just go to the graph editor. So here, switch this to the graph editor. And this will switch back to the timeline, and you can see, okay, now we have, I mean, you can have a dope sheet as well, so yeah, you can have anything you have in other programs, don't worry. And then we can see, okay, we have here our curve, and we make this maybe a little bit like this, and then our animation will look like this. Now, if you want to render it out as an animation, you can come to the render again, and then just press render animation instead of render image. And this is the frame rate that is going to be rendered. So if you would press it, because I'm not doing it, then you will render out then the 250 frames. Okay, I think that's basically all I wanted to cover in this video. If you have any more questions, feel free to comment and I will try my best to help you. Alright, good luck, bye bye.